Good evening and thank you for being here tonight. This is the first meeting in a series of meetings and hearings that are going to be throughout the month. I am going to introduce, or I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, starting over here.
My name is Jean Anderson from Rochelle. I'm Colleen Oswald, Mount Vernon.
Please say if you represent the public.
Tenant representative.
Ken Finger, I'm landlord rep.
I'm Elsa Puerto Rubin, I represent the public.
I am Emma Lofton Woods, Reverend Emma. I'm a tenant representative.
I'm Chuck Lesnick. I'm counsel to the Westchester Rent Guidelines Board and deputy counsel at DHCR.
And I'm Peter Stecker. I'm also here as counsel to the Rent Guidelines Board and I'm a senior attorney with DHCR.
And I also want to recognize our court reporter, Michelle Morales. Thank you for being here. As I said, my name is Elsa Rubin. Tonight I'm going to be the acting chair because, as some of you might know, Jane Morgenstern had to resign due to illness. So I'm going to be representing her, or acting on her behalf. And we want to acknowledge the service that Jane did for this board. We want to thank her for her leadership and for all her multiple years of service. And we are sending her our best wishes for a speedy recovery. I want to also let you know that we, Chuck, do you have any announcements?
Sure. So, Michael Rosenblatt, who some of you may have observed on your way in here, he stopped by just to say hello, had resigned a year or so ago when he moved back to the city. So there are 2 vacant public positions, and the County Board of Legislators met, I believe it was May 14th and for the Appointments Committee, and then on the 21st of May to recommend 2 candidates for approval to be on this board. And as you know, the commissioner instructs his deputy commissioner, Woody Pascal, as well as myself and April Gray Huertas to interview the candidates. Because of logistics, we've always only interviewed 1 so far. We do hope that she will be appointed in time to be here tomorrow. And of course, either one of them may be appointed during this cycle, and we'll have the benefit of getting the transcripts before they vote on anything. So the woman is Evelyn Alicia Santiago of White Plains, and the gentleman is Gordon Highland of New Rochelle. Now, one of the questions that came up before the meeting is that in some years we've had 5 meetings, in some years we've had 6 meetings. The 5 meetings always consist of the 3 public hearings in White Plains, New Rochelle, and Mount Vernon. Then we have a meeting that is open to the public. Actually, it's before our last meeting, which is before the Mount Vernon meeting. It'll be on June 12th in White Plains, and that's where Assistant Commissioner Guy Alba comes with his crew and presents the findings of the surveys. And that'll be June 12th in White Plains. Anybody can come and listen, but that's just for the board. And then there are either 1 or 2 meetings after that. For the purposes of the notice, we assumed that there would be 2, and we noticed, one of them would be on Monday, June 18th at Mount Vernon City Hall in the council chambers for the presentation of the positions of the tenant and the owner members of the board in discussion herein. And then we had reserved time in White Plains City Hall for the purpose of setting rent guidelines for the 1-year period commencing on October 1st, 2018. There are some years that we combine those 2 meetings. It turns out that Ms. Santiago didn't know that she would be appointed, and she's not going to be able to be here for the meeting on the 28th. She's going to be in Australia. That leaves us with two options. One option is open meetings law allows a member to participate electronically as long as it is duly noticed where she is, and that she is seen and can be seen. So if she calls in on Skype, she can participate even though there's a 14-hour time difference in Australia, it might be in the middle of the morning, whatever it is. The other is that if we go back to our schedule of just having 5 meetings, then we can end it all on June 18th in Mount Vernon City Hall. The downside of that is, it only allows 6 days from the presentation of the data. It also doesn't allow the board to sort of reflect on the presentations of the tenants and the landlords, but again, some years that's okay and some years it's not. So I leave that decision to the board to decide whether we should just have 5 meetings or have 6, but I would ask that you do that now before we start the public hearing.
Oh, we have to decide now?
I would ask that just because I would like to be able to notice that so that the public has maximum notice of it. If you want to take an extra day and decide tomorrow, that's okay, but if you could decide now, that would be great.
I'd like to wait till tomorrow.
You'd like to wait till
Yes,
tomorrow?
have to.
Okay. So think about it today. We'll make the decision tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. So those are my announcements. Oh, the other one is just Peter Stecker is here. He's a senior attorney at HCR, and it's just good business practice to train your successor, to have somebody who can fill in no matter how long you plan on being here at an agency or on this earth for that matter. It's always good to have some redundancy and backup. So Peter will be doing the timekeeping tonight. And as it turns out, there is a meeting I have to attend in Manhattan, so I'm going to dismiss myself.
Okay, thank you. Has anybody signed here who wants to speak tonight? Okay, at this point, we would like to proceed with the testimonies. But before I want to most of you know the rules, but I want to just repeat them. Individuals have 3 minutes to speak, and persons who represent organizations have 5 minutes. Since we don't have too many people here in the list, we're going to be a little flexible. But not too much. Also, if you have any handouts to give, please give them to Peter, and he will pass it to us. And when you finish speaking, please stay where you are, because the members must have a question or comment. So wait till. Don't just leave, please. So we're going to start with Ursula Di Resta.
All right, Jeff.
Where's the
There's a microphone there, yeah. It's just,
Can I stop for 1 second?
yeah.
They're supposed to be addressing the board. Shouldn't their thing be answering?
Yes.
Greetings to the Rent Guidelines
Yes.
Board members.
One minute.
I have, where's
He
the,
has a
Peter,
question.
is there some way to move that stanchion over there so she can address the board, or the members can address the board, which is the way it's supposed to be? You didn't know you'd be moving furniture when you came here.
It's part of the job.
We'll add that to the job title. I didn't mean to take.
No, that's a good point.
I speak to you this evening as the property management
manager for De La Rey, a small realty property management business that includes a 22-family residential apartment building on Warburton Avenue that is under ETPA, and a 3-unit building on Central Park Avenue that is not under ETPA. Both buildings have been in our family for over 40 years. I will briefly present 3 tenant-related occurrences in 2017-18 that resulted in significant loss of rent revenue to De La Rey and loss of credibility with social service for veterans. The first involves a veteran, Mr. V, whose apartment was rented on his behalf by Section 8 and his caseworker from the Veterans Association. In 2017, De La Rey rented the apartment to Mr. V, who was subsidized by Section 8 via their HAP contract at $1,400 a month. Section 8 agreed to pay $1,162 and the tenant would pay the balance. Within a month or two, Mr. V took possession of the apartment. Section 8 reduced its share to $463 and then again reduced it to $328. At the time the lease was first signed, De La Rey was made aware that Mr. V had a very low credit score and would not have been accepted as a tenant in our building without the Section 8 voucher paying the majority of his rent. Mr. V was accepted entirely on the basis of the agreed-upon lease terms of De La Rey, and Section 8 communicated with De La Rey regarding how they planned to reduce their rent portion. Mr. V would not have been accepted due to his inability to show proof that he was or would soon be employed. After attempting to work with Mr. V for 9 months via payment plans, adjusted due dates, we were forced to commence legal proceedings for non-payment of his portion of the rent. Cluster intervened and agreed to a one-shot deal to cover 2 months of the veteran's portion. Unfortunately, we were back in court the following month with Mr. V, who was still unable to provide payment for the rent. Recently, the tenant opted out of Section 8 without explanation. In May 2018, another rent collection proceeding was initiated. He did not show up in court, and I found out he abandoned the apartment. The lack of communication from Section 8 unnecessarily put the burden of supporting this individual on De La Rey rather than some other social support agency where it belonged. The ball was dropped by multiple people regarding the payment of Mr. V's rent, and although we tried our hardest to assist him, we are tied by the rules of our leases and our own financial situation, as I am sure you, this board, understands. The substantial rental loss we have suffered, compounded by the additional loss of attorney's fees, order to show cause fees, marshal fees, were due to, meant a loss of opportunities to other future tenants due to lack of financial resources. We are deeply concerned with our future dealings with Section 8 and their negative experience. The second occurrence involves a tenant, let's call her Ms. T, who mastered the order to show cause proceedings. In June 2017, after a year of attempting to receive monthly rental payments, we were forced to begin legal proceedings, initially for non-payment of rent and then for eviction via a holdover. The multiple court proceedings involved Ms. T spinning her story in favor to delay the eviction for 8 months. Sadly, upon leaving our building in February 2018, Ms. T showed her contempt for her forced move by trashing the apartment. For small landlords, such tenants can mean fiscal ruin. Unfortunately, due to significant loss of rental income totaling over $13,000, De La Rey was unable to pay to renovate Ms. T's old apartment. We just painted it and cleaned it. The third occurrence involves a tenant, Mr. B, who requested to move from the 4th floor to the 2nd floor. He did not want to take stairs anymore. Mr. B additionally requested a special accommodation to have 2 ceiling fans installed in the 2nd floor apartment since he did not like air conditioners. Of course, we agreed to accommodate him. Together, we prepared a written contract signed by both parties where De La Rey upfronted the money to pay the electrician's fee for the installation, and Mr. B would reimburse us. He was initially concerned about a one-month reimbursement, so we offered him a 4-month payment plan. Mr. B moved into the totally renovated 2nd floor apartment in November and still has not made any effort to honor his contract. In addition, although we graciously allowed him to relocate within the building, the condition of the 4th floor apartment was left in poor condition, although we requested and he agreed to leave the apartment in a move-in condition. Costs were incurred by De La Rey to clean and paint it in addition to additional loss of 2 months' rent. In our building, tenants have educated each other about how the Yonkers tenant-landlord courts are tolerant towards them when the landlord initiates a rent collection or holdover proceeding against them. We are fair landlords who try for months to work with our tenants, understanding their financial situation and the struggles that many of them face. Unfortunately, this is a business and one that financially impacts our own livelihood. The legal fees accumulate after tenants appear in court multiple times, then decide to pay the rent portion of their judgment only. Okay, one more paragraph?
Yes.
Everyone thinks of the landlord as the bad guy, which is not the case. We are bound by the same business principles that govern all other legitimate businesses. Many small landlords really try to be fair and accommodate tenants' requests. We try to make our buildings pleasant, safe, quiet, that someone would enjoy calling home. We hire members of the surrounding community as our employees to go out of their way to help them as well. Unfortunately, the losses we face every year are ever growing. De La Rey therefore requests that the Rent Guidelines Board grant an equitable rent increase for 2018-19 to enable us to maintain our properties for the mutual benefit of the current and future tenants and other landlords, especially the small ones like us, whose solvency is dependent upon a fair return on their efforts and investment risk. Thank you.
Anybody has a question? Anybody has a question? Yes?
Ma'am, you, in the beginning of your statement, you mentioned that it was Section 8.
Yes, Section 8 and the Veterans Association.
So your building is where on Warburton Avenue?
Near the Hudson River Museum.
What is the number, please?
411.
And this Mr. V was in a rent stabilized one of your apartments, but he was under Section 8.
Yes, he was subsidized by them.
Okay. Which we don't.
And he had a caseworker with the Veterans
Okay.
Association.
But that is not our responsibility. All right. And the other units in your building are all ETPA
Yes,
tenants?
it's a 22-family building, so therefore it's all ETPA.
But are there any others under Section 8 that are renting under Section 8?
Yes, I have 2 or 3 of them, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we proceed, I want to let the record show that Eddie Mae Barnes is here present.
And just a pause, I'm sorry, Councilor, so I can see who's speaking and just either move this
Move it.
a little bit more so I can recognize who's
Okay.
calling. I can't see. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
Michelle Morales. Good?
Oh, that's what she's speaking.
Jeff Foster?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Jeff Foster. I am with Sprague Energy. We're a large supplier of heating oil, supplying many of the apartment buildings in Westchester County and throughout New York. I'll wait until that's passed down. I'll be very brief. I just have, we're a supplier of fuel, so I'm just giving you raw data that won't take long at all. If you look at the chart, to the left, it shows the cost of crude oil, and this is according to Bloomberg, not according to Jeff Foster. According to Bloomberg, was about $45 a barrel a year ago, and it went up as high as about $71 a barrel. Currently, you'll see the number in the top left, $65.66. So it's moved up about 50% using the number of a year ago. And that clearly indicates much higher costs to heat and cool. That's it. I mean, I could tell you what's going to happen or what might be happening in the next year, but I think the board is generally interested in what happened in the last 12 months. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, anybody has a question? No?
I have a question.
Yes.
I know you're not a prognosticator, but what do you see in the future regarding, given the situation with the limitation of supply and the summer coming up and things of that nature, to the price of crude oil?
Well, if I may, let me to answer your question, let me go back a year, and then that will give us a little bit of clarity to see where we are now. The oil companies, when the price of oil dropped, these are the exploration and production companies. When the price of oil dropped so low, they were very concerned that as they drilled for oil, what if they hit a well that there was nothing in there? There would be a huge cost that they would have to explain that to stockholders who were used to getting dividends. So what they did, they said, okay, we're going to stop, we're going to not stop, but really decrease the number of exploration and production operations going on. And with that happening, the inventory dropped of available product. And when the inventory dropped, the price started to go up. And that's what brought us to where we are now. Now, going forward, we're producing a lot of product. The United States is producing 10.7 million barrels a day. But I have two questions, and I don't have the answer to these questions. We were, on finished product, we were refining about 17 million barrels a day, the United States. We need about 22 million barrels a day. Then there was a storm. I forget the name of the storm. It was about 2 years ago. It hit the Gulf Coast. And can anybody help me on the board there? It was a major storm. Shut down everything. I forget.
Was it Irma?
Doesn't matter. Well, it took the production from 17.5 million barrels to 16 million barrels. Now, we had a very cold winter this year, and prices really escalated. Now, next year, is the production going to go back up to 17 million barrels a day? And is it going to be a cold winter or a warm winter? And what are the geopolitical conditions going to be? I don't have answers to any of them, nor does anybody. But it does look like that there is product around. There's plenty of product to be had, but it's not going to be dropping down to the $40 barrel. That's the general consensus, that it's going to remain pretty close to where it is. Now, given a little warm weather and a little high production, that could bring prices down, and the reverse could bring prices up.
Anybody else?
Mr. Forster, I have a question. What number of oil would you say that most of your customers are using in their building?
Number 2.
Thank you. Did that, for most, as some of the owners have testified in the past years, did that involve them having to convert their boilers in order to use a number 2 oil?
Convert them? Yes. Well, many of them, I go back many years, but at one time, a long time ago, 70% of our business was number 6 oil.
Right.
Which is a heavy product that you had to heat just to move.
Which costs a lot.
That's going away July 31 in Westchester County. It went away in New York City.
Okay.
People are burning number 4 and number 2 oil. So they had to convert to number 2 oil, which involved some adjustments on your burner.
Modifications.
Correct.
Not total replacements that would have warranted an MCI? No?
I can't answer anything on the MCI. That's not my level of expertise. And depending on what you were doing, it would depend on how you had to make changes to your burner.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Giselle Manca? Did I pronounce it well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good evening, panel. My name is Giselle Mankin from Realty. I would like to talk really about just not for the expenses of heating, or I am talking about the maintenance of the properties. And that is always overseen in every year when we come here to talk about an increase. The properties have to be maintained, and that costs a lot of money. If there is no profit by the owner, then they cannot maintain the buildings. And the property cost of labor, the labor cost, is very high. There's never any money left, because we never talk about the labor cost of maintaining the building, where the tenants live. We have a lot of vandalism, doors broken down, hallways destroyed, and even if we have cameras, the people still don't have to pay for it. It's the landlord who has to fix it, okay? And after an enormous cost of taxes, heating, water, and bills, there is no money left. So we really ask for a decent increase in next year, if you would really consider that. And we also, I'm very much against slum. We need to keep the neighborhoods clean, and we can only do this by having enough money to put back into the building. So we keep the facade clean, the sidewalks have to be done, and then also tenants have to be taught not to throw garbage out the window. That's another thing, but let's decide the point. But that's what I'm saying. Maintaining property costs a lot of money. That garbage men have to get extra money to get rid of all this garbage that's coming out of the building. And then also, like I said, vandalism. So I really would appreciate to consider this and not ignore the importance of keeping a neighborhood clean, to keep the neighborhood decent, the buildings, not just my building, the whole street. And everybody has a decent increase, we can keep the area or the cities beautiful. And I thank you.
Anybody has a question?
Where is the building located?
Where are your buildings located?
I don't get you.
Where are your buildings located?
Oh, where I'm located in a very beautiful city of Mount Vernon. And I tell you, since I'm there the last 10 years, it became a much better place. And it's in all the cities like that. It's really all over. But Mount Vernon is really a lovely city, and I like to do business there. And but I'm saying it has to be. We need extra money to really increase. Also, how about a lawyer? I need a lawyer's letter to tell them not to throw the garbage out the window. It costs money. The lawyers, they want money. So I really would appreciate if you consider how about a 2 to 4% increase. Okay? Yes?
The garbage problem, is this something new?
Now, it's always been all over the place. Always. We keep extra people on duty in order to make sure that the garbage bins, the garbage goes in the garbage bin.
Yeah.
And not next to the garbage bin. So there is labor cost involved. You have to pay the superintendent more money because he's looking out all the time that things are being taken care of. See, I cannot stand a neighborhood, it's not necessary to have a dirty neighborhood, but it's really, also the people living, the tenants live there. They want to have a nice place to live in, right? So they have to pay a little more money to have it well maintained. Okay, and I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ken Nielsen?
Mr. Nielsen.
There are two sheets in my handout. One is basically just an outline of what I'm going to talk about. And the second one is a copy of my most recent tax bill. This is from the county tax bill. We haven't gotten the one in the city of Yonkers yet, but I'm going to talk about that at the talk. So I'll point that out to you later. So thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm going to talk about four things. One is who we are as landlords. Second is about the increasing real estate property taxes. Real estate property taxes are basically our highest cost. The dramatic increases in water rates, especially in the city of Yonkers, and the high maintenance cost of aging buildings. Some of my colleagues here talked about that before. So who are we? The people here, we're not large corporate organizations. The people building these buildings out here, the big real estate investment trusts, that's not us. It's like a different world. Most of us are family businesses. This is our livelihood. And in most cases, we're the people who provide affordable housing in especially the cities of Westchester, especially the southern cities. And what we're asking is that landlords need sufficient income to be able to maintain the buildings at the level that we want to do and for the tenants. So it's like we have a symbiotic relationship. We need a certain amount of income to be able to do what we need to do. So number one is increased real estate taxes. As one of my colleagues said in the past years, we only collect it. We only collect it. We don't have much control over the taxes that are being assessed against us. An example is the county tax. If you look at the county tax bill, and this is the one we just paid in April of this year, and I, blacked out some of the specifics about this particular building. But if you look in the middle of the page where there's a black circle around it, this is the county tax assessment. Went up by 8.42%. We're not talking about 2% like the state cap, 8.42% for the county taxes. Now, we get a county tax, but Yonkers kind of loads on some other things to this tax, not just. So you have this, what is called the South Yonkers Sewer District. That went up by 17.6%. If you look at and the second one, which the Solid Waste District, went up by 6.6%. So overall, the tax bill that we paid in April of this year as compared to April of last year went up by 9.6%. I mean, that's a significant increase when you're talking about the guideline that was enacted last year, which is 1% or 1.5% for a 2-year lease. It isn't close to seeing what the cost, to covering the costs. And as I say, we have no control over that. We get billed by it. We have to collect it from the tenants. It goes to the government. The reason for the 2% tax cap was to try to teach governments to limit the amount that they spend. It obviously hasn't worked. And somebody's got to pay for it. The second is the third item is dramatically increasing water rates. Water rates in the city of Yonkers have gone up 300% in 10 years. That in 2008, the combined water and sewer rate was $1.50 per CCF, which is 100 cubic feet. In 2018, the sewer rate was combined water and sewer rate was $4.73. It's actually 315%, but over 300%, a factor of 3. And it's a situation where we have no control over the water. We, plug the leaks that we can, but the tenants control. I've walked into some apartments where people have the hot water going, and they're defrosting their meat in the sink using hot water on for an hour or 2 hours while they're defrosting water. But the meter still clicks. We have to pay for it. And in some of my properties, the cost of water is actually more than the cost of fuel. And the last item is the cost of maintaining aging buildings. All of these buildings are old. Some of my buildings are actually over 100 years old. And the cost of maintaining the buildings in major and minor ways is tremendous. And I have one situation during this past year where on one building we spent over $200,000 doing basically replacing the bricks in one part of the building. And so someone said, well, should that qualify for an MCI? I'll pass it along to the tenant. No, it doesn't, because the requirements are that I would have to replace all of the bricks on the outside to qualify for an MCI. That's just cost of operating the building, and it goes into the maintenance cost. And that's not atypical of these older buildings. But it was the right thing to do. So, in summary, we need a certain amount of a reasonable increase, and 1.5 and 1% is not reasonable to continue to maintain the buildings. We all know that there's a tremendous pressure right now because there really just aren't enough apartments to go around. But that's not our fault. The fault is that we haven't built enough. There was an article recently about by the Furman Institute in NYU that said even like in New York City, the population in the last 10 years went up by 11%. The number of housing units only went up by 8%. And that's caused a squeeze. And what I found is that as the economy now has picked up after the recession, is that there are more formations, family formations, there's more pressure. But you can't lay that on the landlord. We're just trying to struggle through with our properties to maintain them as well as possible. But the grand scope that's beyond us is that there isn't enough housing around, and the government is not building enough affordable housing. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer. Yes?
Good evening, Mr. Nilsson.
Good evening. Reverend Lawful Woods, how are you?
Good. How many buildings do you own now?
8.
In Yonkers?
In Yonkers, all in Yonkers.
8?
8.
Okay. Now, you spoke about increases. What is the maximum rent that one of your tenants pay in either of your 8 buildings?
Any of my 8 buildings?
That has not maxed out yet. What is the maximum before the threshold of deregulation? 1,900, 1,700?
I have one that's it's maxed out. It's become deregulated because it's an 8-room apartment. That's a little over $2,000.
Okay.
8-room, 2-bathroom apartment.
But so that's deregulated?
Yeah,
It's
deregulated.
2,500 is the amount, isn't it? Ken?
Actually, 27.
27 now?
27,
2,700?
That's the current threshold for legal regulated rent, not the preferential rent.
Okay. But aside from
27 and a change.
aside from the one that
It's
has...
actually higher here than it is in New York. I don't understand that. Maybe the DHCR can explain that. but-
Aside from the apartment that has maxed out, has reached its threshold,
Oh, the other,
about what is the highest rental that you have in any of your buildings?
that's still, I guess, I can't answer that. But
okay.
it's, that's still under rent regulation.
Right, under
Yeah.
ETPA and
That's
ETPA.
part of ETPA.
Roundabout.
I guess I just can't answer that. I have to go through every one of my apartment listings to see. But it's not as high as 2,000, I can tell you that.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We have the sun glare here, so I'm sorry.
And there's no shade.
Yeah. Dennis Harai?
Handwriting.
Thank you.
Sunglasses.
I left it with the carpet.
Those are those. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen of the board, my name is Dennis Henry. I'm the Executive Director of Mount Vernon United Tenants. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We're passing out packets that I have for everybody. I don't know if people got a chance to see them, but there was a recent four-series of an article in the New York Times regarding the housing crisis. And I thought it was a very, very illuminating series. Those of us who work, in eviction prevention and housing kind of know this stuff as it is, but I think this is really an illuminating article for people to realize what people are going through, the crisis the tenants are facing day in, day out. So I wanted to give you this tonight so you have a chance to read through them carefully, all of them. Some are a little bit longer, but there's really good information in all of those articles regarding the real crisis of affordability that's impacting so many people and really ruining lives. We hear landlords complain about a couple missing dollars here and there, and that's tough. I know it's tough for them, and especially with small limits, it can be a tough game. But the fact is, it's much more important that people have a roof over their head. I deal with this stuff day in, day out. We run an eviction prevention program. We stop approximately 200 evictions a year. So I see the pain, and I feel that pain day in, day out that's been exposed in this series. So I really would just like this board to take their time between now and then and take the vote to read through that stuff carefully and to get a real good picture. I've offered for people to come to my office. Ms. Rubin came last year. Come to my office and spend an hour, a couple of hours with us, see what it's like, what people are experiencing. People come in crying, terrified, young single mothers with 2 kids. What are they going to do when they get an eviction? What are they going to do? They're going to go to the shelter system? They don't want to do that. They don't want to go on the street. It's just desperate. The rents are getting so high, people just can't afford it. This board is mostly passing the renewal guidelines. We haven't seen any landlords divesting themselves of their property because they got a 1 or 2% increase. They know their real increases come from the vacancies. That's proven every year in the data that this board's going to get. The real increase that the real estate industry depends upon the vacancies. They don't really depend upon the renewal guidelines. So we really think, given the circumstances now, given the greater exposure of the housing crisis, not only here in New York, but throughout the country, there's more and more attention being paid to it. Matthew Desmond, college professor, has written a good book, Evicted. I think there's more and more attention being paid to that. Like I said, the New York Times has traditionally been editorially against the rent law system. They devoted some time and energy to this. They did a 2-year study on some of these things and really dug deep in to see. They just didn't take the landlords' BS on this stuff. They really ran into the community and saw the damage that was being done by ever-increasing rents. you guys as a board are the first line of defense to stop these ever-increasing rents that are causing so much pain and suffering to our people. So I'm asking you guys to read through this stuff carefully. I'll talk next week at I won't be at the hearing tomorrow night, but I'll be at the one next week in New Rochelle. But hopefully you guys have been able to digest the information that's in there and make your decisions accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody?
Mr. Enright, how many evictions have you handled this year?
Excuse me?
How many evictions have you?
Well,
have
this
you-
year?
Yes.
I don't have an exact
Since
number.
last year, since last year's guidelines were
So we mean
passed.
in 2018?
2007, from last year's guidelines that went into effect in October
Well, I
until
mean, you
now,
know,
roughly about
yeah.
how many clients have you?
It's been pretty much similar for the last couple of years, in the range of 175 to 200 evictions each year. And the guidelines, thankfully, this board has passed reasonable guidelines the last couple of years, so we really haven't been hurt that much by that. You know, the real killers are the vacancy allowances. We see people coming in every day. There's some buildings in one of my good friends and our members, Tamara Stewart's going to be talking before long. There's 4 buildings there with over 700 units. Almost every one of those units is like one vacancy allowance away from deregulation. I mean, there's buildings like that. We see preferential rents all over town. There's landlords there's been so many loopholes in the law that allow landlords to raise rents. They're doing preferential rents because they've actually surpassed the market. I mean, that just shows you how this system has been manipulated and destroyed by the real estate industry.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alana Chipatelli. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and I want to thank you for your service. I'm a real estate broker, insurance broker, and the co-chair of the Apartment Owners Advisory Council. In addition, I also manage several ETPA-regulated apartment buildings that my dad built. As the co-chair of the Apartment Owners Advisory Council, I would like to clear up a common misconception regarding our group. Specifically, that our membership is composed of large owners and managers, the fat cats of the industry. That simply is not true. Most of our members are smaller landlords of buildings with 35 units or less, who are constantly struggling with the day-to-day management of their buildings. We are the mom and pops of the industry, if you will. Since we're operating on a tight budget, often we are our own bookkeepers, rental agents, secretaries, and we perform basic upkeep for our properties. Whatever job that needs to be done to maintain the daily upkeep of our properties, we do ourselves, since in most cases we can't afford to hire outside managing agents, as there's simply not enough money in the budget. The members of the AOAC are the type of landlords this industry needs, not the type of absentee landlords that unfortunately most tenants who testify at these hearings have. We care about our tenants, we are hands-on. We do not have buildings that are riddled with violations and problems. We are also the landlords who take a direct hit when this board passes ridiculously low rent guidelines. We are constantly struggling to make ends meet while making sure our tenants receive good service. And honestly, it's exhausting having to work under such financial pressures that are created not by my action, but rather further exacerbated by the passing of low rent guidelines. Now you may say, why did I sell the building? Simply, my father built it. It's passed down from generation to generation. I'd like to pass it down to my nephews if I could. But I'm running out of ways to make up for the shortfalls in my budget, and I ask this board for help. Please pass a guideline that is fair to smaller landlords as well. Also tonight, I would like to once again ask this board to address the need for a low rent guideline. These artificially low rents have a crippling effect on the smaller landlord. Case in point, 50% of a 21-family building that my family owns houses units that are well below market. For example, Unit 2A, an apartment that rents for $416.56 when the market is about $1,700. That's $1,284.44 below market. Also, Unit 1F, another 2-bedroom, that rents for $741. The market again is $1,700, so that's about $959 below market. Every year we ask that question: why should those paying rents that are market subsidize those paying rents that are well below market? After all, we pay market rates for gas, insurance, taxes, overall repairs to the properties, etc. These artificially low rents have a devastating effect on the smaller landlord, since as with most smaller landlords, there's simply not enough rental units to go around. You see, when you have this type of loss, which is created through no fault of your own management, the market rents simply cannot subsidize those that are below market, as there are not enough units in the building. At the end of the day, numbers are black and white, and a loss is a loss. Every year I've spoken at these hearings, I state that the failure to properly address low rents, coupled with very low guidelines, is forcing small landlords out of the industry, out of business, if you will. Unfortunately, this again seems to be the case this year. I would ask that a separate addendum be added to this legislation to properly address the issue of low rents. Finally, I'd like to address those persons or politicians who inevitably speak at these hearings, the ones that always call for little or no increase in rent guidelines. To them I say, seriously, we can't. Are you kidding me? I realize that there are more tenants than landlords, and more often than not, they are playing to the crowd and what they want to hear. But please don't forget the smaller landlords. We have a voice as well. We need to be heard. Remember, listen to both sides of the argument, and don't just leave the small landlords high and dry. Why don't we all help try to come up with a better solution, rather than be part of the problem? Or maybe come up with more ways to fund affordable housing projects in Westchester, and realize that it's not the smaller landlord's job to fix the ongoing affordable housing shortage. We must realize that the relationship of landlord and tenant is codependent. The low rent guidelines that have been passed over the years has a crippling effect on the smaller landlords. Please remember to pass a guideline that is fair to all of us. I thank you for your time this evening.
You know I'm going to ask you a
I
question.
have a question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where are your units?
North Broad in Yonkers?
Yonkers.
Yes.
On North Broadway?
North Broadway in Yonkers?
And how many?
We have 121 family, and then I have a building on Farrow Street in Yonkers. It's an 18 family, both subject to ETPA.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hang on, please.
Oh, you would? What?
Yeah. How many of your units are at $400? Did you say 400?
416, just one.
One. And at 700?
Just one.
One. And how long have those tenants been your tenants?
The tenants have passed, the first apartment has passed through succession rights,
Okay.
so they have been in the building for a while.
It's family now, past
Correct.
it? Okay.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then the second, probably since the 70s, 1973, 74.
So it's an older individual?
The second, yes.
All
The
right.
first,
Senior?
yes.
Okay, so they have screen?
No.
Oh,
They didn't.
Okay.
No.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Tamara Steve?
Good evening, board members, advocates, and my fellow citizens. My name is Tamara Stewart, and I live in Mount Vernon. On May 20th, 2018, the New York Times published an in-depth series of 3 articles about the state of affordable housing in New York, the series that Dennis referred to. The series had been researched for about 2 years and was based on hundreds of interviews and thousands of document reviews. The Times reporting team presented a sobering picture of greedy landlords, dishonest architects, weak laws, lax enforcement, minimal penalties, victimized tenants, and a rapidly shrinking pool of affordable housing leading to rising homelessness throughout New York City. If you haven't yet read the series, I strongly encourage you to do so, and I've included a copy with my remarks as well. In 2018, Housing Justice for All, a campaign fighting for stronger tenant protections, an end to evictions, and an end to homelessness by the Upstate Downstate Housing Alliance, released a report entitled Cuomo's Housing Crisis, Homelessness and Unaffordability in New York State. The report's first key finding is that nearly half of the state's tenants are rent burdened, paying 30% of their incomes toward rent. A substantial share of tenants, about a quarter, are severely rent burdened, paying nearly 50% of their income on rent. I have included a copy of that report with my remarks. While none of these findings are new, they are important reminders about the increasingly precarious position that millions of vulnerable New York tenants find themselves in, and Westchester ETPA tenants are no exception. Over the next few weeks, you will be considering whether or not Westchester will impose rent increases on ETPA tenants, and if so, how much. I ask that you keep in mind that your decision will affect tens of thousands of tenants, many of whom are already severely rent burdened and whose hold on their apartments is already tenuous at best. Tenants' cost of living continues to rise. Wage growth is still slow at best, and far too many tenants' paychecks and Social Security checks just aren't keeping up. I respectfully request that you please take a stand for fair and affordable rents and pass 0% increases for the coming year. I thank you in advance for your thoughtful consideration. Westchester tenants are counting on you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Which last names to it?
No? Thank you. Rosanna Rubiano?
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. This is the first time I'm here, so bear with me. I am just here to really communicate my experience and what the experience of the tenants in my building have gone through. And like some of the individuals here have mentioned, the extensive research by the New York Times article, I can attest to approximately 25% of the tenants in my building that have experienced a lot of the tactics that our landlord had implemented to try to have us leave the apartment. So approximately 25% of us as tenants have been subjected to some form of what I would consider harassment and patterns of trying to evict us, such as preferential rent clauses that were not highlighted, in addition to illegal registration of what we would consider the legal rent for the unit. My family has been subjected to chronic mold issues as well as quite a few of the tenants, approximately 25% of the tenants in my building, to chronic mold issues for 3 years since we've gotten a new landlord. And I've been in that building for almost 20 years. And it wasn't until we did get a new landlord that we felt we were truly being subjected to some of these unethical tactics. And so my family, which includes a young toddler and an elderly mother with medical issues, has been subjected to 3 years of mold issues, rent overcharge, although we try to resolve these issues, refusing to renew the lease, and reduction in services. And I can attest to, we are educated tenants. We have multiple degrees, and yet we are struggling truly to make ends meet. And it's not that we don't want to do the right thing. We are adhering to the laws, but this is not an issue that affects people of a particular income bracket. It affects everyone across the board. As educated people who are persistent, we are barely making ends meet for these same issues. What I have heard here is my perception of we haven't truly addressed the issue of what is the profit margin, what is the bottom line. I don't truly believe that if there's any owner of a business that was in the red for 40 years that they would still remain in that business. So the issue is, what can we do for the people who are just trying to avoid being homeless? So thank you for your consideration and for your time.
Thank you. Anybody has a question?
Where is your building?
It's 525-527 Riverdale Avenue in Yonkers.
Anybody else? I just wanted to mention, if you have issues with mold or any other health hazards, you have to talk to Peter here, and he will refer your complaints to the appropriate person.
No, she has to call the City of Yonkers Housing.
No, that's already in.
You have already taken care of it?
That's in the works, yes, thank you.
Thank you. Before we adjourn, I want to make a few announcements for the next meetings. The next meeting is tomorrow in White Plains City Hall at 7 o'clock. And then the next public meeting will be in New Rochelle City Hall on June 13th. Yes. And then we have, the board has the data analysts that come and they give us the numbers, and that will be on June 12th. And the next one is on Monday, June 18th, in Mount Vernon City Hall at 7 p.m. For a full schedule, you can go to the website, which is nyshcr.org, and you can find the whole schedule there. I also wanted to thank you for being present here and for participating. This is very important to us to hear from you. I'm sorry I couldn't get your question because this is the public talking to us and not public talking to each other. So, but if you have any other questions after the meeting, please feel free. We want to listen to everybody. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Yes. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.